stranger knocks on the door of the family's house on Forest Avenue with her purse.
But this story just in tops tonight's Eyewitness News. A sad ending to the case of a woman missing for nearly a year and a half.
It's been 37 years since a mom of 3 disappeared in Chautauqua County in rural western New York.
The families deserve the closure. What a horrible pain and cross to bear, not knowing how your loved one died.
A cold case that's being cracked wide open.
She was alive for a period of time at a location that we've identified in the state of Pennsylvania. We're not going to talk about that location because we are looking at suspects that could potentially be tied to that location.
Our reporter, Maki Becker, found out all eyes are now being focused on a former Buffalo attorney as a person of interest.
That's what we're looking for the public to hopefully fill those blanks in for us.
I'm Drantch, and this is Voices of the Voiceless. So this is such a bizarre but fascinating case, and Maki is here with me. I guess I want to start here and set the scene for everyone. Who is Kathy Wilson?
Okay, so remember, we're going back 37 years now, right? Kathy Wilson was 33. She was a mother of 3, and she lived in Jamestown. Now, Jamestown is a place where a lot of women have gone missing. There's a lot of very strange unsolved cases related to women there. But, you know, at the time she was an office worker, and the day she went missing, that's May 18th, 1988.
Wow.
You know, it's a long time ago, right? And what we know is that she went to work. She had an office job at a place called James Schwab on Falconer, which is really close to where she lived. And what they know is she went to work and she went on a break and she went to a supermarket to pick up some food for lunch. They know that her van ended up at the Chautauqua Mall after that.
Did she drive there?
They think she may have been seen there. That's one of those questions, but they know her van was there because after that, she doesn't come back to work. She doesn't pick up her kids. Clearly, there's a missing person here.
So when you consider that this is 37 years old, a cold case, why are police just now starting to pick up and look into her case?
Well, the Chautauqua County Sheriff's Office started this Unsolved Chautauqua unit about 3 years ago now. And it seemed to be inspired by all of these unsolved cases.
Well, how many are there?
There's like 20.
Wow.
Yeah, so there are different ones. There's missing people, there's unsolved murders, and also just unidentified people.
Remains,
right, that they've never been able to figure out who they were. There are a lot of these. And this all came to light, I don't know if you remember back in 2022, and this is another case that's really like popped up recently too, where there were 2 bodies found off a trail in the town of Portland, really rural, remote place. And they were trying to figure out who it could be. And there were just so many of these cases. Like, it could be this missing person. It could be this missing person. Turned out to be a completely different thing. But I think that did bring to light the idea that they need to, put some light on it, put some work into it, devote, actual investigators just to these cases.
So just so that we can differentiate here, the person who police think is responsible for those 2 deaths in the town of Portland, those bodies that were found on a trail, that person's been arrested.
Right. Just a couple months ago now. That's Richard Fox. And those were 2 bodies that were left there very different times. One had been there just a few months, the other decades earlier. What a terrifying, horrible thing.
Absolutely. I mean, that's scary and it's sad for any family. I mean, you consider one person missing is devastating to a family, but then it seems to be like there's a trend, and that becomes a little bit of a mystery.
Absolutely. Now, here's the weird thing. They don't think it's just this one person with all these cases. That's not what's happening here. But there are these unsolved cases. Some probably are connected. Others aren't. With Kathy Wilson, I haven't heard that it's connected to another case. But they're so similar, you have to look at them.
Right. And you mentioned that there was this one big clue, and it's where Kathy Wilson's body was found.
Right. Now, let's go back to Kathy Wilson. She disappeared in 1988 in May. It wasn't until September of the next year that her body's found.
Almost a year later, 6 months later.
More. May to September of the next year.
Of the next year. Oh my gosh.
Right. And it became a huge case.
Sure.
Everyone, the media was covering, and I actually went back and found our footage of, actually with the help of D.L. Webster, we went into the archives and we found when her body was finally found.
What did that video look like? We're talking video from the late 80s, early 90s. But when you saw that old video, what did you think? What goes through your mind when you're seeing where Kathy Wilson's body was found?
Well, it's a huge part of the case. And you know what's incredible? It looks exactly the same. So where she was found is over the border into Pennsylvania. It's called Landers, Pennsylvania, off a road called Lindell Road. It is very remote. It is not someplace that you accidentally end up at. It is just a long dirt road that kind of goes down a hill and then up a hill, and it's just woods on either side. And where she was found was deep into those woods.
Who found her?
Kids playing in the woods nearby.
Wow.
Yeah, and they found what they thought were the remains of a bear. And they asked their parents and the adults around, and they all came, and they could tell it was not. There
What
were
was
fillings.
it?
There were fillings in this.
Wow.
So it was quite clear this was human, and it just took a few days later they were able to connect her. Now, what's incredible, we're looking at this old footage, right? It's literally on VHS, right? Grainy. It looks exactly the same. I went there in July with the investigators because they were reopening this case, and they were telling me about how this is clearly a clue. It is so remote. You don't just stumble onto a place like this. You don't, this isn't a wrong turn. This tells them it's somebody who knows the area. It's somebody maybe who lives there, used to live there, there's something about that location that's going to connect them back to whoever did this.
So do investigators think that the suspect, the person of interest, still lives there or still has ties to that area?
Well, so through reopening the case, we went to the location. We did a story back in July, and after that aired, they started getting new tips, and which is incredible.
That's what they want.
That's exactly what they want, and they had now going back to her old case. Two people were arrested. It was considered a man and then a teenager who they said they thought had helped. The man was acquitted, and the investigators think that was the right way to go.
Okay, so how long ago was that?
That was not long after her body was found.
And so going through the process and going through the judicial process that, often takes about a year, we find out that one was acquitted, another...
They dropped the case against him. He was like a 16-year-old.
And so to not have a person of interest, not have a suspect anymore, that's got to put police behind the eight ball.
Absolutely. And what they also talked about, how because there was an arrest, because there was a trial, in a lot of people's minds, they think, oh, that's who did it.
Right.
So they're going to discount things that they saw or heard or thought about or any of those things. So investigators run into issues when
some bias.
Right. Bias, and just like, oh, they've already solved that. And they didn't, but the perception's out there. But then they reopened the case and they put it on Facebook. There's a lot of interest. We did our story.
Right.
And you get the new tips, and then it generates this completely new lead.
And this lead is really bizarre. I mean, we're talking about a former Buffalo attorney,
right,
who is now the prime person of interest in the death of this woman almost 38 years ago.
Well, we'll call him a person of interest. They are being careful. We haven't, the person is deceased. So his name is Chris Brunea, and he died in 2020. But here's what they know about him. That he went to college with Kathy Wilson and her husband at Grove City College in Pennsylvania. They show me yearbook images of him, and they know they cross paths. They know he had connections. He's from Buffalo, but had connections to Pennsylvania, as well as Jamestown, that Chautauqua area. He was an attorney that that specialized in like guardianship, family law, things like that.
Estate planning.
Exactly. And what they heard, one of the tips they heard was that Chris Bernea went to visit Kathy Wilson's father-in-law while he was in the hospital. So the father-in-law was a patient at Buffalo General. And I don't know all the details, but Chris Bernea went there and visited him.
Did he have some sort of intention?
We don't know whether it had to do with something with estate planning. We don't know. But so that's one of the things. They're looking for more people who may have seen him there or know about this visit.
So who is this guy? Who is Chris Bernea?
He's so he was an attorney. He doesn't have any close relatives at this point. One thing, if you look into his background, he's a lawyer, but he also personally sued, filed lawsuits having to do with a head injury he had at some point, and he accused a hospital of misdiagnosing him. And maybe that's a clue. We don't know.
Like something was off?
Like having to do with traumatic brain injury and things like that. And it's very odd.
So why are police looking at this former lawyer, somebody who, you would often hold up on a pedestal, as a person of interest?
The tip, someone called them after seeing our story and wanted them to know about him. Now, what they also think, clearly, Kathy Wilson disappeared. This isn't an accident.
Right.
What they think happened now is that she was abducted and taken to Pennsylvania, an undisclosed location. They have not told me where, but somewhere over there, and that she was kept for a period of time before she was murdered. And then her body was left in Landers, where it was ultimately found. Now, one more clue related to Chris Bernea. They believe he was seen on her street by her house in Jamestown the day before she disappeared.
Wow.
Now, I don't know if there was interaction. I don't know why they think this. I believe he was driving a Ford Escort at the time.
So somebody can put Chris Bernea in the same spot as Kathy Wilson right before her death.
Right before her disappearance, we should say. Disappearance.
So that is, I'm not a police officer, but having, been doing this for long enough, sometimes coincidences don't exist.
Right. A lot of cops will tell you that. They don't believe in coincidences. Now, what was he doing there? We don't know. They would love for people who saw her or saw him or his car or anything that day to come forward. So that's something they're looking for. They're looking for people who may have seen him at Buffalo General or, know of him visiting Kathy Wilson's father-in-law there. Know anything from their college days, but they're, clearly he's a person of interest. One thing I think we need to think about, did he work alone? Was this a solo thing? Is this part of a larger conspiracy? I don't know. What's interesting, so we did another story in February about Chris Bernea being a person of interest, and apparently that's generated more tips too.
Wow. So your stories have led to the floodgates opening.
It's certainly helped, and that's the thing with cold cases, unless you put attention on it,
Right.
people are going to forget.
Now, have you spoken with Kathy Wilson's family at all?
I haven't. That's something I want to do. I really hope to be able to do that.
And what about Chris Bernea's family?
Apparently he doesn't have any close relatives at this point. And I do believe the investigators have reached out to them. But right now, that's there's nobody.
So when you think of forensics in 2025 and you think of solving a cold case, so often DNA plays a pivotal role. What kind of evidence do police have at this point outside of maybe like old DNA from 30 years ago? If they found her bones, can they connect it to anything?
it's hard to tell. I mean, her remains, had been there a long time. They were scattered. And that tends to happen in these cases, right? When bodies are found a long time later, especially if they weren't buried. But the location is important. I don't know if there's clothing that could be something that they can look at. I don't think this is going to be about DNA. So it's circumstantial evidence, right?
Interesting.
Which are harder, way harder to prove. But I think this, what they've been able to gather so far is putting them closer to solving a case. Now, if it ends up that the suspect is dead, they can close the case. You're not going to get an arrest, but we don't know.
At least it would give some closure to the family.
Right. And I think just a sense of justice and relief. And, so many of these cases out there have gone unsolved. To solve one, right, would mean a lot and maybe help with others.
You mentioned that there are so many other cold cases in Chautauqua County. Do police think there are more remains in remote locations like this one?
There could be. There are some people who have never been found.
Wow.
What comes to mind is Corey Anderson, a mother of three also who went missing, and she's never been found. And I went along on a search for her a few months ago too. Now, there's a group called the Western New York Missing and Unidentified Persons Network, and they have been great about bringing attention to these cases. And they will organize searches, and they get volunteers, and they will fan out across an area where someone was last seen. In the case of Corey Anderson, it was near where her van was last seen or was found.
Sure.
That's, by the way, is a state police case. Actually, the Chautauqua unsolved people are not handling that one.
As for Kathy Wilson, though, what do police want somebody who's watching to know? What do they want them to know about Kathy Wilson? And then perhaps about Chris Bernea?
With Kathy Wilson, they want to solve her case.
Sure.
She was a mother. She was, it sounds like she was a completely innocent victim who was abducted, and something horrible happened to this woman. And it's not right. And for that to go unsolved with no justice, that's, they are very motivated to try and solve that case. In terms of Chris Bernea, they want to know if he was involved, and if he was, how, and what happened. What happened to Kathy Wilson?
So where was he last seen? Where was she last seen? And, what should people know if they're trying to jog their memories? Did I see something?
So the key moments that they know of, they believe he was at her, on her street near her home in Jamestown the day before she disappeared.
And is that Forest Avenue?
Yes. Yeah, Forest Avenue in Jamestown. The family doesn't live there anymore. I went to go visit it. It's, it's a pretty busy street. There's a gas station there.
So somebody had to see something.
Right. And somebody clearly did. They've given, some sort of clue about that to the police. They're looking for any more evidence of that. Now, of course, this is before the days where everyone had a ring cam and dash cams and all that. So it's harder, but not impossible. I mean, somebody remembered, right? They are looking for anyone, who saw him at Buff Gen visiting Kathy Wilson's dad or father-in-law sometime in the years before, not right at the same time. So sometime in the 80s, if they saw that. Also, but, anything related to Chris Bernea in Pennsylvania, I think he owned a number of properties out there.
Why Landers, Pennsylvania?
Yeah, I don't know if it was in Landers itself, but that's where she ends up. But that or Warren County.
Sure.
Right? Just over the border. And it's, it is what, like when she disappeared, huge case, right? Huge case. And there were all these weird clues. So a few months after she disappeared, they found her van right away.
Right.
At the Chautauqua Mall. It's just left there, right? Did she go there? Did someone make her go there? We don't know. And then I think it was, let me look this up. Yeah, so then March, so of the next year, her keys turn up in an alley in Jamestown,
Wow.
turned into the police. Where did that come from?
Somebody just found a random set of keys and handed it over to police.
Yeah.
You would think nothing of that.
Right, and it turns out to be hers, right?
How did they connect the dots?
I think they matched, right?
Wow.
I don't know if her name was on it,
Sure.
or, or something like that.
Something led them to say this is Kathy Wilson's
Yeah.
set of keys.
Right. And it's like, what is it doing in this alleyway? Right. And then, really weird, a few months later, a stranger knocks on the door of the family's house on Forest Avenue with her purse. Yeah. And
I just got chills.
Right. And it turns out the purse was found pretty close to Landers on Akeley Road. The police took me there too, to just kind of see, it was very close to where her remains are found a few months after that.
Mm-hmm.
So someone made an attempt. To me, what that sounds like is that they were scattering
Right. Evidence all over the place.
Away. But at the same time, that all brings it back, to where she was found.
There's a lot to dig into here,
Yeah.
and there is so much information that is still unknown. And this case is going to spark so many more openings. And that's the goal for the Chautauqua County Sheriff's Office, I assume.
Absolutely. I mean, they want to solve these cases. And this would be a huge break for them. This would be like, yes, we can solve these. This would be a big step forward. This might help other people rethink the cases and think, remembering tiny details
Right.
that may seem like nothing, like, oh, I saw that guy at the hospital. Maybe that is something.
What drew you to this case, Maki?
It was actually their Facebook posts. I was looking, I was following what they were doing after the Chautauqua cases, and I know the Western New York missing and unidentified persons. They went there and they were showing the location, and the investigators have been posting on the Facebook page little clues. And I reached out and I said, "Hey, could we meet down there? Could you show me?" And they said, "Sure," because they know the more attention these cases get, the more likely they're going to solve them. And I think this is a great way. Like they can put attention on it, but unless other people know, and we're letting people know about it, and that's what we do in the media, right?
Well, this is true crime, and if you have any information about this unsolved case, you're asked to call the Chautauqua County Sheriff's Office. The hope is somebody watching this will have some sort of a memory about what happened in Chautauqua County back in the late 1980s with Kathy Wilson and Chris Brunea. If you have any information, any thought about what could have happened here, you're asked to email unsolvedchautauqua@sheriff.us. And if there's a case that you want us to explore, email us at news@wkbw.com. I'm Ed Drantch.